Hi, welcome to Cares Everywhere. It's me, Anthony Brown, aka the Ghetto Practitioner. Man, I am excited as usual to be up here in the studio one more time in gorgeous California. Yes, folks, I traveled all the way from Ohio just to be here. Today, I have a special guest with me today. I'm sure you're going to find him exciting, enlightening, and definitely down to earth. And I'm just, man, it's it amazes me of who God puts in my life that I get to share my experience, strength, and hope and space with. And also, as always, I have to give credit where credit's due. Behind the scene, we got Solomon. Yes, buddy. If you're ever in Long Beach area, come by Podcast Place and show your face. Anyway,
Hi.
moving right along. I'm extremely happy. And so let me just get right down to it. This individual I want to introduce you to. He's got a story, folks, and he's got a lot of information that I want to share with individuals who have probably, possibly, or might eventually walk down that same path. Today, I'm going to introduce you to a good friend of mine I've known for over 10 years, Mr. Hollister George. Hey, what's up, Hollister?
Hey Tony, how you doing?
Man, I am doing well. You know, everybody here on this podcast know me. You know where I come from. I spent most of the 90s in and out of prisons and jails until I got my life in order. But I went in on an installment plan. Our guest, folks, is going to blow your socks off. But again, his story is not uncommon. And I just want the listeners to pick up some tidbits and understand that sometimes, even though we make mistakes, recorrecting that mistakes can cost us emotionally, financially, socially, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But we are willing to pay the price to get everything right. And so I want Hollister, if you can just give us a little backdrop about who you are and what has happened or what you're going through.
Okay. Hi, my name is Hollister George. Right now, I reside in Orange County, California. However, the majority of my life I spent incarcerated. My last term, I served 21 years of incarceration.
21 years.
Yeah.
Okay.
I received a life sentence at the age of 17,
Mm.
and again, spent the majority of my life incarcerated. I started off, like a lot of young people, with a lot of mischief, growing up, going back to juvenile hall, juvenile placement, and such. And then at the age of 17, I was out, with some friends. We'd done some things, and I ended up serving 21 years in prison.
21 years. Now, man, that's 21 years is almost like I guess they say when you're 21, you're able to actually buy some booze and vote. And here it is, you did 21 years incarcerated. And again, things happen. And when we're young, we make all kinds of foolish decisions. You know, and just right out the gate for those listeners who are young and still want to make some foolish decisions, what little piece of tidbit advice can you tell them when they're out there trying to do something that they know they shouldn't be doing?
Well, I mean, I would just say think twice. I mean, because generally we know what the right thing to do and the wrong thing to do, but sometimes we want to be, part of the in crowd,
Mm.
and and I think it's natural as human beings. We're social, and so we want to be a part of something. But
Mm.
unfortunately, a lot of the youth, especially youth growing up in poor areas, have a tendency to gravitate towards things that are not in their best interest.
Mhm.
Um, people and ideas and such. So, just realizing the fact that, there are many other opportunities, for you out there. If you want your life to be easy, you're gonna have to do what's difficult when you're young. And if you want your life to be hard, then just do what people think is easy. And again, you'll have a similar path as me.
All right, great, great. And see, there's a little tidbit of truth for you youth. And it's really, really fascinating how just by making difficult or not even difficult, foolish decisions can cost you pretty much an adulthood. And so moving right along, we're going to circle back at that one. So, at the end, you're going to be able to, I want you to share something else with the youth. But moving right along, here it is. You're young, you're 17, adventurous, let's just say, and you end up having to do 21 years. Now, when you first, I've done time. Okay, I never done 21 years, but I have done some time, and I know when I first went in, it didn't seem that bad. When you first went in, your first experience, and having them tell you you have that much time, what was your first thought when you first, went in?
Well, to be honest, by the time that I got that sentence, as I mentioned, I had already done time. I mean, obviously not that much time, but I had done time. And so I had been in and out of incarceration since like the age of 11. So, to be quite honest, unfortunately, I was somewhat used to doing time. At the time, I had obviously had the wrong perspective. Kind of growing up, I imagined myself in that type of situation, which unfortunately a lot of our young people, they see themselves in there. They don't see themselves in college and school and things like that. So um, initially, it wasn't as difficult. The thought about that wasn't as difficult as it normally seemed like it should be. But that's only because of the situations that I had already put myself into leading up to that.
Mhm. Okay, and so pretty much you was already conditioned for the experience that you was gonna encounter, so the transition wasn't really that difficult because you're pretty much knew what to expect and was used to it and things like that. Or I think, Solomon had a question before the show. What was that question?
Oh, well, I guess I wanted to ask you, when you said you were young and you were doing some things, what do you feel was missing from your life that caused you to gravitate towards those bad influences?
Mm,
Well, I feel it was a similar situation to a lot of the youth in a lot of our areas. Is that I didn't have like the proper role models, and I'm not necessarily talking about like my parents. I mean, I had decent parents; they never been to prison or anything like that. However, we all know that young people, they don't really follow their parents as much as they follow their friends,
mm,
and they follow the people that's in the community, people who they see as being successful, regardless of whatever that success may look like. And so, as a young person, kind of growing up in an area, you don't see the people around you don't have a lot of education. The ones that do have any kind of money, they're out there doing some sort of illegal activity, and the people who are not engaged in those type of behaviors are pretty much the people that get picked on,
mhm,
and they're the ones that again are, they look like the outsiders. And so to really, to be cool, to be the insider, obviously, you got to be part of that crowd. And I don't think it's really much different than what I see now in society, when I look at social media and such. So I would say the biggest impact came from not having, the right influence and people to help me to understand that there were other ways that I could have chose to be successful, such as education, plenty of educational opportunities, different career paths that I could have followed, and and I wouldn't necessarily had the same outcome. However, but when you don't know that those resources are there, they might as well not be there.
Yeah.
It's as if they're not there to that person.
mhm. And it's and I think that's a critical point that you just put out there. Even though there's resources out there, if you don't know where they are or what they are, then you don't get to select them. And sometimes we tend to do exactly what's in front of us to the best of our ability, but unfortunately, sometimes that can be a bad influence. I'm gonna, I'm not, I tend to not tiptoe around things. I want to jump in someplace and let us know if you're comfortable or not. Um, what happened? I mean, how'd you end up getting that long stretch of time?
Okay. So as I've mentioned, I was in and out of the system since the age of 11.
Now, don't
So
give us anything graphic, okay? This is PG. Go ahead, man.
So I was in and out of the system since the age of 11. So again, I was into the criminal lifestyle. I kind of saw myself as being a part of the criminal lifestyle. I kind of grew up in juvenile hall, juvenile placement. So, naturally, I kind of gravitated towards people who were in that lifestyle. And so, in my personal situation, without going into specific details, I was with some friends, some associates, and we were out at a park area, and went out, used some drugs. That particular day happened to be smoking PCP, and got into an altercation. One of my friends got in an altercation with a law enforcement,
Okay.
and so at that time they got into an altercation. He um, was shot by the police officer.
Okay.
And when the police officer shot him, I fired a shot in their direction to draw the gunfire and was charged with shooting at the police officer. They also charged me with him being killed, which I think is kind of a lesson for young people, is the fact that if you're involved in a situation with someone and someone is injured, or their life is ended because of that situation, then you could be charged whether you're the one that actually took the life or not.
Mm, mm, mm. Guilt by association and penalized for a long time. And thank you. I appreciate that. You know, for one thing, obey the law. Okay, first and foremost. I mean, I understand a lot of people might, want to be a little adverse to them, but everybody has a job to do, you know. And and again, thank you for being so open. And it's we all make mistakes. We're all young, and we all learn. And you know, unfortunately, you got a major penalty for that situation. Now that's done, and we're moving forward, and that happened, and you still had the price to pay. And so they broke you off a lot of time, okay, a lot of times. And during your time, now that you're not a juvenile anymore, you're 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 in the big house, okay. You're in prison, like, and I know juveniles have prison and everything else, but I've walked the yards of prison, and I don't glamorize or anything else. It's just part of my life. Okay, but now you're there in your situation, knowing that you had a lot of time. At what point is there any time in the beginning where you come to realize, like, oh man, I got a lot of time, or did it? When did you come, or did you come to that realization?
Well, there was a point that I came to the realization that I could have a different life,
Mm.
that I didn't necessarily have to spend the rest of my life in there. And again, I was sentenced, excuse me, I was sentenced to a life sentence. So
A
there
life
was a,
sentence.
yes, there was a possibility that I could have had to serve the rest of my life in prison.
Mm.
And at the time when I was in, if you had a life sentence, pretty much you weren't going anywhere. There were plenty of people, they would go to the parole board, but you would just go to the parole board to see how long it's going to be before the next time you go to the parole board.
Mm.
You were not getting a parole date. And the people that did get a parole date, the governor would take it.
Mm.
So pretty much nobody was going anywhere. But so in the beginning, let's go back to the beginning. So in the beginning, for a long time, I blamed my situation on society, on just the way that society was, and um, again, I blamed the situation on the police because, again, I mentioned the police officer actually killed my associate or what have you, and then I came to the realization that it's always been me from my juvenile offenses up into the adulthood. I've made certain decisions that continue to lead me down a road that I really didn't want to be on,
Mm.
right? And it was more about the consequences. So the transition really came when I finally realized, like, look, I don't want to continue facing these consequences. And to be honest, the initial transition wasn't because of me, let's say, wanting to be a good citizen, let's say, initially. It was no longer wanting to face the consequences. And I realized that the only thing that was going to change, me continuing to go down that path or have those consequences, is I had to change certain things about my behavior.
Mm.
And so in the process of changing my behavior, I started doing different things. I started educating myself, because when I was out, I did not do any education. Growing up, going to school, the teachers would just pass me through the grades so they didn't have to deal with me the next year. I literally didn't do anything in school. I got my GED in the county jail. And, I always tell people that I accidentally passed the GED because I was just trying to get out of the pod. And, I went and I took the GED and passed it. One of the things I began to realize, though, I started tutoring, which really didn't make much sense because, as I mentioned, I didn't go to school. But I did start tutoring. And whenever I would learn something, I would always teach other people, the things that I learned. And I learned a couple things. One is that education wasn't as difficult as I thought it was.
Okay.
Two, I actually enjoyed learning. Three, I like teaching people, right? So I like, talking to people about things that I learned, teaching them certain, things that could potentially benefit them and help them to move forward in the right way. And so I realized that a lot of my, let's say, dedication in the criminal lifestyle, because again, I was a helper in that lifestyle as well. I helped my friend in that situation. I wasn't going to leave. I wasn't going to leave him in that situation. There were two other people that were on the scene. They immediately fled the scene. I was not going to leave. I was going to, if he went down, I was going to go down as well. So I've always been someone that liked helping people. But again, my loyalty was just misdirected. And so as I began to realize I no longer wanted to face these consequences, I had to make certain changes in my life. I started to educate myself while I was incarcerated. I started to share the things I learned with the people around me who were also incarcerated. Realized that I actually enjoyed sharing the things that I was learning, and over time, so I changed the behavior initially again, but over time, my actual values, like the way that I thought, actually began to change. And so and so that again. When most people talk about behavior, they talk about how your behavior will follow your thoughts, right? So you think a certain way and you're going to act a certain way, which is generally true.
Okay.
But I found for myself that my thoughts begin to follow my behavior. So I changed the behavior for a particular reason, again, to avoid the consequences. And over time, I started to see the results of me changing my behavior, and so my I feel like my values began to go in the right place. I stopped blaming society. I stopped blaming the officer, that was involved in the situation. And I realized that every negative, and I know it's not the case for everyone, but every negative consequence that I've had to deal with throughout my entire life has been a direct result of the decisions that I made.
Okay, now the decisions you made.
That I made.
Okay, and I think, not to cut you off or anything, but I think that's an important thing for other people to understand. Because a lot of times people will point one finger at somebody else and they got three pointing back at them. And I know the only thing that we really have control over is ourselves. And like you said, and it's so skillfully put out there, is once I start changing my behavior, my thinking started to change. And so we're gonna bring it forward a little bit, okay? Because now you realize that, hey, I'm done with the consequences, so my behavior is going to change, and you're educating other people. And I'm pretty sure not just by the words, but by your actions and demonstrations and things of that. And by doing so, did that help you being able to get a release, get off that life sentence to come out?
So yeah, I mean, as I started to help other people, so one of the biggest benefits you're going to get out of life is helping other people.
Okay.
And sometimes you'll hear people make statements like, you might thank somebody for helping you out, and they're like, "Oh no, it's okay. It does more for me than it does for you."
Hmm.
And so you'll think their statement is kind of like, "Oh yeah, whatever," right? You think it's kind of cliche, but it's actually true. And I've learned this in a couple different ways. So for example, tutoring people. Again, I didn't educate myself growing up, so tutoring people. I used to also tutor some people, ESL and stuff like that. And so when I would have to write a paper for college, while I was in there, I started doing some college classes and stuff. And when I would have to write a paper, I mean, my grammar was like all over the place. So like some of the things that I was helping the ESL students to understand would help me to proofread my college paper.
Okay.
Right. So I would have all kind of stuff in there. And so I would realize my mistakes by the things that I was teaching them. Also, I started studying the law, right? I didn't have money to pay for an attorney to
Okay.
go to the parole board with me. So I started representing myself at the parole board. And I also started filing my own habeas corpus petitions. And when I started doing that, I also started teaching other people who had life sentences to file their petitions as well. And the more I would teach people to, and the more difficult it was for them to understand, like the harder student they was, the more I would learn, and I began to realize that over time, and that really helped me the most. That gave me uh, the most understanding about that idea that when you help people, it actually helps you.
And that's a good segue. And again, I appreciate that because I know that as a professor myself, I learned so much teaching other people. It sort of solidifies the knowledge that you read, and so that's fantastic. Love this story, love it. And what I want to go, or where I want to go, is now that you realized what you did is over.
Mhm.
Okay. Now that you realize that you change your behavior and your thinking's over, and now that you realize that there's a benefit in helping other people, okay, now you don't walked out the gates and you're out here now.
Mhm.
Okay. As you entered back or re-entered back into society, what do you think was the hardest thing that you encountered when you first got out?
Um, Life.
Life?
Yeah.
Okay.
So again, I kind of grew up in the system. So to be honest with you, I was more used to that than like what I call normal people stuff, right?
Normal
Actually,
people stuff.
actually, I use a more seasoned word for stuff. But,
Okay, no, we're gonna
keep it
unseason
clean.
it today.
We're gonna
Yeah,
keep
we're
it
gonna
clean.
unseason it. Keep the
But
flavor out.
I hadn't really did normal people stuff. So so getting out, number one, before I got out, I, wondered like, okay, who's going to hire me? At the time, I'm getting out. I went in at 17. I'm getting out at 38 years old. I had never had a California ID,
Woo!
right? I'm not saying driver's license. I'm saying ID,
ID.
right? Because at the time I was like, well, what would I need an ID for, right? I'm not gonna be working. I'm not gonna be doing anything legal. So if I have an ID, the only thing I'm gonna do it is in the process of commission of a crime, probably drop it somewhere and they're gonna be able to identify me. So I didn't even need an ID. So I'm getting out, 38 years old, never even had a California ID, never held down full-time job, part-time job. I think I worked a day for a plumbing company one time when I was younger. That's about it.
Mm.
So, getting out, so I, obviously self-esteem, telling me like who's gonna hire me. So that was one of the first things. Didn't think, I was really gonna be able to get a job, but I just felt like I'm like, okay, I don't know how I'm gonna do it, but I'm gonna do it. Like it has to happen. I don't know how it's gonna happen, but it
Okay.
has to happen. So, I get out, put on my best face. We all have our persona, our, the mask that we wear in public. And so again, I put on the persona of confidence. Um, wasn't all that confident about my situation. I was confident that I wasn't going to put myself back in prison, but I really wasn't confident as to how I was going to make it.
Okay.
So, so first getting out, initially they put me in a sober living for retired veterans up in Fresno, California.
Okay.
Never lived in Fresno. So that's where I first started getting introduced to life. At that time, I didn't have an ID card. Actually, I needed to send down to Louisiana to get my birth certificate, to get an ID card. So just kind of walking around, just kind of getting used to being out, getting used to cell phones and all this type of stuff because they didn't have any of the technology when I first went in. So,
And was it
Mhm.
when you say you had to get used to a cell phone? Well, you, I mean, a lot of us is used to it. What was it like?
well,
I just want to know.
I mean, a lot of these young people, they're born like with cell phones, but when I went in again in 1989 is when I get in. 2000 went in 2010 is when I got out.
Mm.
So you didn't have like you had some people that had the big bricks that look like maybe the thing in the army they would be calling coordinates in or something,
Right.
right? So getting out, I didn't have a cell phone. By that time, cell phones started floating through the prisons and stuff like that. But I wasn't messing with them by that time because, again, I was trying to get out. I wasn't trying to do anything that was going to keep me in longer. So the first time me put my hands on the cell phone was when I got out. So, the first phone I got was one of the little flip phones or
Flip
whatever.
phone.
So I just thought I was just the coolest thing ever with my little flip phone.
Okay.
And, everybody else, they had their Samsungs and iPhones and all this stuff, right?
Right.
And so the first thing is figuring out how to use this phone. Just, dialing numbers, and then the flip phone, it was just a horror trying to text, right? Because you had to go through the different numbers, try to get through the letters and all that stuff. So then I got my hands on moving down, I came down to Orange County, California. My current employer, Nancy Clark, I worked at Nancy Clark and
I
Associates.
love Nancy Clark.
She gave me a place at a sober living. She used to have a sober living called Wings in Costa Mesa. And so she gave me a place down there. And so I was living there at one of the sober livings, and one of my roommates at the time had a Samsung phone. And he let me, use his phone. And that's when my first introduction to the internet, right?
Okay.
And I began to see like all of the stuff you can do. And I realized what Google was. And when I was in prison, I used to see the Android commercial. I had no idea what it was, but I used to always hear him say droid. And I was like, oh, that's cool. What's that, right? And so I get out here and I realize, I'm like, man, this is cool. And I became addicted. I really addicted to the technology, I guess you would say. And I started learning. So I started making use of the technology, started figuring out how to use the Android phone. And I actually would use the phone to teach me how to use the phone. So for other long-termers, that's a little bit of piece of advice for you is that I hear a lot of people who've done a lot of time, they say they can't use the phone. Now you can actually Google how to use the phone. Like
Google
the phone will tell you how to use the phone.
Let me make sure I got this right now. Here it is. You get out, and you're used to seeing commercials, a droid, and then you get out, you get a flip phone. It's like all of a sudden you get a regular cell phone, and you get introduced to Google. And so now you're using modern technology to teach you how to use modern technology.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's one of the things that I realized when I was in there is I didn't have to make the decisions that I made. So I had, I had a level of creativity, which I feel like most drug addicts, alcoholics, ex-cons have a high level of creativity, but it's misdirected.
Mm-hmm.
It ends up being misdirected towards something that's going to cause problems in their life. So I realized that, I was kind of a smart individual, but I had just never used it. So, so the more things that I was introduced to, I would figure out how to use those things to learn even more. So, and Google, Google became my best friend.
Yeah, Google's my friend.
Google still is,
my best friend. Okay, so that's cool.
Can I interject with a question real quick?
Yeah, go ahead, Son.
So when you said you got out, you went into a rehab. Was this just basically somebody did you a favor, or did you go there because you still had an addiction problem at that time?
So, and my addiction was more associated with the criminal activity as opposed to the drugs and alcohol.
Okay.
But it was two favors. So one, so when I got out, first of all, I was court ordered out through the federal courts. I was filing writs of habeas corpus. I won, and the federal court ordered my release. The state parole initially did not want to supervise me, so the federal pretrial services were supervising me at the time. They knew the owner of a sober living in Fresno, and so they put me up as a favor to those federal pretrial service officers. Then the federal pretrial service officers contacted Nancy Clark, who is the owner of Nancy Clark and Associates, and contacted her about me, right? Not having any money. And they told her that, they had a guy who had, been in prison. He served 21 years of incarceration, pretty much don't have any money, trying to get down to Southern California because his family's out in Riverside County. My family don't really have a lot of money. Place where my parents live, I wouldn't been able to go and live there at the time. So it was just kind of a favor that she did, and she's actually, helped a lot of people. A lot of people.
Let me sneak in a quick Nancy Clark note. I love Nancy Clark. And the reason why is because, as you guys know my story, you probably read my books and everything. Nancy reached out to me. I didn't have nothing. Absolutely nothing. I didn't even know that I was capable of doing anything until she told me, Nancy Clark told me, hey, you are capable of doing things. Mm-hmm. And that was 27 years ago. Yeah. And you guys all know my story. But let's get back to Hollister's story. And so you get out, you met Nancy, you understand, you no longer want the same consequences because it's like an addiction. Once you get started, it's hard to stop.
Yeah.
And so you're done with all of that, and you found Google.
Yeah.
Okay, and what when you went to a restaurant, or what did you look forward to any kind of meal or anything, or what did you find fascinating? I'm curious. What was your taste
Well,
buds aching for?
I mean, I found everything fascinating. As far as taste buds, I didn't have any. I'm very simple when it comes to eating, except for I'm also a finicky eater. So there are like a lot of things I don't eat.
A finicky eater.
Specifically, like healthy food. I don't like healthy food, unfortunately.
Well, I mean, well, you're
But
fat, but
getting out and going into the restaurant. Well, one interesting thing happened. So I went into this restaurant. Me and my parents, we went to Baker's out in Riverside, and so we're in there, and I go to get a soda. So when I went in, you go to the soda. If you're in the restaurant, you had like the different sodas. You just press the whichever nozzle that you were getting the soda. You get your ice, and then you get the little lever. So, but this soda machine, it was a screen, right? So it was a screen, and there was just one hole at the bottom.
Right.
So first of all, I'm looking at the screen, and you got all these different choices. And so it was like almost overwhelming, like all these different choices that you got. Because I've been ordering Canteen for like 21 years. So all these different choices is just like almost overwhelming. So I'm like, you know what, forget it. I'm just gonna do Coke. And so I just hit Coke, and like 10 different Cokes pop up.
Right.
I'm like, oh my goodness. So I mean, and that was part of the problem. But the other problem was, I'm like, okay, I just got one hole in this machine, and you got all these different choices. Where are all these different choices going to come from?
Right.
And so one of my major difficulties was getting a fountain drink.
Love it. I love it, man. Love it. And it's fascinating that people don't realize how much change occurs out here, during a specified time period. And I'm gonna take a chance. What emotions did you feel, or what's some of the challenging emotions have you experienced? Because now, I mean, in prison you have a certain life,
Mhm.
and you develop a certain set of emotions that pretty much survival. I mean, that's the way it is. But out here, you have all of this other stuff. What did you feel when you even when you got to the points where, okay, well, this flip phone is difficulty, or the soda machine is difficulty? What kind of emotions did you feel? I don't know.
I mean, there was a whole mixture of different things, emotions that I went through out here. So again, the survival emotions you mentioned, as far as incarceration, again, I was accustomed to that.
Right.
And I mentioned, in a lot of ways, that was an easier life for me than out here. So the initial one I would say would be, fear. Fear of the unknown. I think that's everybody's biggest fear. I really believe is that most people, when they're afraid, not of a specific thing. They're afraid of not knowing like what to expect, or not knowing what's going to happen. So fear was one of them. There was frustration, which goes along with anger. When we talk about like anger and stuff, but one thing that before I got out, I realized that anger is number one, secondary emotion, and it's one of those emotions that is more of a protective mechanism against you feeling vulnerable. So anytime that you feel vulnerable, you will begin to transition to anger. So if you but I learned that I had to stop and think like, okay, I'm getting angry. And anger is like pain. It's a symptom that something's wrong. And so rather than acting on anger, I would try to figure out, okay, what's really going on? Okay, I am angry. However, what's really happening? Like why am I angry? Because if anger is secondary, that means there's something else that's primary going on.
Right.
So, and I realized first and foremost, a lot of it was fear, which again, a lot of men don't want to, you don't want to say fear, afraid.
Yeah.
You don't say that. You can say angry. We can identify with that, but you don't identify with like fear. There was
You just made me want to put some bass in my voice.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay, go ahead.
There were certain feelings of, not being able to kind of measure up to other people in society. There was I've never particularly been ashamed of the fact that I was incarcerated, but I did, I did have a certain part of me would kind of compare myself to saying that, okay, I'm not on the same level as them, right? But and I kind of feel like, that wasn't quite right, because my thinking of I'm not on the same level as them, was sometime as far as my humanity, and we're all on the same level,
All of us,
right?
right.
We're not necessarily on the same level financially, and those are some bad decisions I made. But we're not on the same level financially, but we're, as human beings, we're equal
Yes.
as human beings. So so that was one of the first, things that I had to really start getting used to when after I was released. And so I just started building on that. And so, I made, good decisions, made some bad decisions, and
Everybody
stuff
makes
like that.
bad decisions.
But they weren't the same type of bad decisions. I had what they, a lot of people in recovery would call quality problems now. Whereas, before I had stupid problems.
Right.
I make the distinction between stupid problems and quality problems. Stupid problems are, again, decisions that you make where there are going to be negative consequences, but you still do it anyway. Quality problems is, kind of comes along with living life. Like when they talk about living life on life terms, certain things kind of come up. And then again, some of it could be bad decisions where you could make one decision or you could make a better decision, right? And you don't make necessarily the better decision. But it's still, again, it's not illegal,
Right.
right? But, there's still consequences with that as well.
Yeah, like taking all your money out of your 401k, then discover you get taxed for it later on. Yeah.
Woo, yeah.
I believe me, not like I'm speaking from experience.
Yeah, or spending up all your money rather than investing it.
Right.
And
Okay.
ended up in,
Okay, and so here it is. You're at Nancy's, and again, I love Nancy's, but here you are, and I take it that's where you work at?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and so here you are working at Nancy's. Anybody that knows anything about Nancy, she believes in helping underdogs, and she helped people get back on their feet. I know she was the catalyst to my success, and it seems like she's a catalyst to yours. Doing and knowing the knowledge and spending that time incarcerated, and you're already used to teaching people. Now that you're out here, are you still doing the same? Are you still teaching people how to change their lives?
Oh, absolutely. That's one of the reasons that I remained with Nancy Clark. So again, when I first got out, I didn't go right in there as a job. I went in there as a client at the Sober Living, and I had to do like outpatient classes and different things like that. But I started going to Cypress College for the drug and alcohol counseling, and when I was going to do my internship, I ended up interning at Nancy Clark's.
Okay.
And pretty much been there ever since, with a brief stint of working somewhere else for like 1 year in between there. But other than that, since like 2013, I think I've done my internship over there at Nancy Clark and Associates. And our population basically are the formerly incarcerated for the most part, or people who may be potentially facing incarceration. So this is, like, again, my favorite population. One of my favorite phrases is "you people," right?
Oh, here we go.
And,
Here we
and
go.
so
Now.
I'll
Now
use
we
you
open up
people.
a can of worms.
I'll use "you people," and everybody get offended by that, right? All like my clients and stuff, and I'll use it with them. I mean, they like, once they get to know me, they'll start saying, "Hey, you people," they'll come up, "Hey, you people," right? But I let them know, look, I'm one of you people, right? I've been through the system. I've done similar things. I've done worse, than some of you have done, and I've learned that when I changed my behavior, my life changed. When I started making different decisions, my life changed. Was it easy? No. Am I perfect? No. But it's better, right? And practice makes better, right? Some people will tell you practice makes perfect. It doesn't. Practice makes better, right? But that's all we're trying to be. And then, and some people say, well, better than what? And I say, better than me. I'm trying to be better than me. So I'm trying to have today's me better than the yesterday's me.
Okay.
And then so on and so forth. So tomorrow's me should be better than today's me. And so these are some of the things that I try to teach the clients. But yeah, I'm still working with clients. I do that on a daily basis. I absolutely love um, working with people and seeing people change their life. I'll see clients that come through the program and go on, move on with their life, and not everybody makes it. Some people say, well, everybody eventually is going to get it. No, everybody eventually don't necessarily get it, but those that do, it is absolutely amazing to see them come back, let you know the things that they're doing in their life and how their life has changed.
Mm.
And I'll see some of the clients, they'll come back and they're doing better than me, and stuff like that. And the thing is, I'm glad, I'm happy about that. And I don't take credit for that though. Some people try to take credit for the client's success, and I'm like, no, the client's success is to their credit.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I only take credit for the willingness of wanting to help them.
Okay.
But if a client doesn't accept your help, then there's nothing you can do.
Right. It's the same story as the alcoholic and the addict.
Yeah.
Once they admit to them innermost self that they have a problem, then they start doing the work. It's like, as a sponsor, because I'm a sponsor. As a sponsor, only thing I can say is all I did was just gave you direction and some
Absolutely.
support. You did the work.
You did the work.
And so that goes out to almost anybody out there, that's whether you're making bad decisions that end in some incarcerations, or if making bad decisions end up in inebriation. You still got to do the work.
Absolutely.
There ain't no free ride. And so, man, this is good. And so you get joy out of helping other people. You get to do something that you've been there, done that. It's not like you're coming from a textbook teaching. You're coming from experience.
Mm-hmm.
And people can identify that and feel it. Now, don't get me wrong. I know some college professors do teach different things and never been through it, and they're good at it.
Absolutely.
Okay. But I also believe that everybody united together is what makes the bigger picture.
Mm-hmm.
Because I wouldn't have been able to have the education I got unless somebody taught me that. And the same thing. And you have life experience. I'm gonna bring the plane back and get ready for a landing. One of the things you started out as, talking to the youth, because those are our futures. That's going to be our future. I know one day I'm going to get old and older, and, going to have to depend on some of the younger people out there now. And for those youth that's out there making questionable decisions, okay, what would you say to them to get them to hear that sometimes we should think about doing something different?
Well, first I would say value your life.
Value your life.
Your life is very valuable, and we sell our life for cheap.
Cheap.
When I look at social media a lot, I'll look at like YouTube and different things, and I'll see young people out there. They record themselves committing crimes, and assaulting people, different things, and they're proud of it. And it seems like, again, that's what get the views, that's what get the popularity and stuff like that. But there are so many opportunities out here where you could have good. You could have a good life. You could have the life that you want, but you have to work for it. And it's worth it.
It's worth
right?
it.
It is absolutely worth it. The chips are not stacked against you. The chips, and that's one of the biggest messages that I have, even to a lot of my clients, that a lot of people will disagree with me with, is, people will tell these young people that they're less fortunate, that the chips are stacked against them. And the chips are only stacked against you to the extent that you believe that. Right? If you believe that you will be successful, you will be successful because you will move in a direction of success. Right? And even if you don't believe it, like I was saying when I mentioned about my change in behavior, move that way anyway. Right? You already know what the bad life is going to get you. Right? If you don't know, learn from me. Like the old Crash Dummy commercial. You can learn a lot from a dummy, right? So you don't have to go through the experience to experience it, right? So know that you can make different decisions. You have opportunities out there. You have programs that are specially geared towards helping you to get an education. If you don't have money, there's money available for you to go to school and get a decent education. If you don't have, let's say if it's difficult for you to learn, right? You have programs that are out there to help you to still get an education, to help those who have problems or learning disabilities, right? So no matter what excuse that you would use as to why you would put yourself in a bad situation, there are no excuses. So if you fail, that's a decision. Success and failure are decisions, right? It's a decision. So you can choose to win or you can choose to lose, but just know it is a choice, right? And there's nobody to blame except the person you see when you look in the mirror. And that was one of the, I guess, earlier you asked, like, what was one of the most difficult things for, I guess, difficult realizations for me. And that was one of the most difficult realizations for me, is that it was all me, right? So I did all of these things to myself. If I could have blamed somebody else, another group, another ethnicity or whatever, I mean, it would make me feel better, like, oh, poor me. But when I really realized and I really look back over my life, it was me. But the good thing about that realization is that earlier Tony mentioned that you can, the only thing you can change is you. You can change your behavior, right? And if it was somebody else's fault, then I would really be in a bad situation because I can't change them. But because it was my decisions that led me down that bad path, I can change my behavior, and therefore I can change my life. And so that's the message, is you can change your life by changing your behavior. And again, even if you don't believe it, right? Just do it. Right? Somebody,
Make like Nike. Just do it.
They said just do it, right? And I really believe in that. If you just do it, you will begin to believe it. And I say, what do you have to lose? Right? You know what you have to lose if you go down the wrong path, right?
Yeah, a whole bunch of life.
What do you have to lose by trying to do it the right way?
All right. Well, folks, you heard it straight from Mr. Hollister. He gave it to you raw and uncut. He gave it to you with no pulled back anything. I appreciate the fact that you came to be with us, because care is everywhere, and whoever hears this message is meant to hear the message. Whoever don't, then listen again, listen again. I would love to continue to go on. Thank you again. I appreciate you coming on the show today. Thank you, Solomon, from behind the scenes. Folks, you heard it here first. Mr. Hollister.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm grateful. So we're gonna wrap it up right now. As much as I hate to go, well, Solomon's gonna give me the boot anyway. Stay tuned, folks, for the next episode of Cares Everywhere. And until the next time, it's me, Anthony Brown, aka the Ghetto Practitioner, and I will see you all soon.